Hello everyone, my name is Mama Zaki and now I would like to answer the question of English Drama Task Meeting 4. Question number 2. Based on the types of drama, tragic comedy and tragic comedy, you find A. One example of drama from each types. You cannot choose the three types, but giving the example from each type is a must. In tragedy, I have Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, and in comedy, I have The Mission of Finance by William Shakespeare, and in tragicomedy, I have Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. B. Finding the example of drama from Elizabethan until the modern era. Mention the era of the drama, the playwright, and the synopsis from the drama. In Elizabethan era, I have the Mission of Finance, and the synopsis is the fire, rich and fruitous Portia, the heiress of Belmont, has attracted the attention of many would-be suitors. Among these is the noble but penniless Bassanio, a Venetian gentleman. Certainly, he would have no hope of winning Portia's hand without adequate funds for wooing. So he borrows 3,000 ducats from his Mason friend Antonio. Unfortunately, Antonio's money is tied up in shipping and he must ask the Jewish moneylender Shylock for a loan. Shylock and Antonio are not on friendly terms since Antonio detests usury, and he would never have had anything to do with Shylock were it not for the financial need of his friend. To Antonio's surprise, Shylock agrees to the loan interest-free, but suggests in Mary's sport that Antonio sign a bond that will permit Shylock to slice a pound of flesh from Antonio's body if the loan is not repaid within 3 months. Certain that at least one of his merchant vessels will return before that time. Antonio signed the bond and turned the need funds over to Bassanio, who lived at Ons for Belmont with his friend Gratiano. The matter of wooing Portia is more complicated than he knew. Bassanio soon learns. Her deceased father has decreed that all suitors must choose from a gold, a silver, or a lead case cheese. If the suitor unlocks the case containing Portia's portrait, she becomes his bridge. Bassanio is the lucky suitor to Portia's delight, and so she gives him a ring as a token of her love which he vows to wear forever. Likewise, Nerissa, her maid, gives a ring to Gratiano, who has successfully wooed her. Soon after, Lorenzo, another friend of Bassanio's, arrived with Jessica, Shylock's daughter, who has deserted her father and eloped with Lorenzo, a Christian. Alas, word soon comes that none of Antonio's ships has arrived, and Shylock is appealing to the Venetian courts for his pound of flesh. Bassanio and Gratiano return immediately to Venice to help Antonio. Portia devises a plan of her own and disguising herself as a young male lawyer with Nerissa as her clerk arrives at court just as things are going very badly for Antonio. At first, she attempts to soften Shylock's hurt with her famous speech on mercy. He is not to be moved, however. Portia thanks her approach and his instruct Antonio to bare his bosom in order that the agreed upon pound of flesh might be extract. Shylock might take his pound of flesh, she agrees, but he is forbidden to spill even one drop of blood upon pain of death. Outwit, Shylock relents, but Portia quickly points out that he is liable to have his property confiscated and be executed by Venetian law for polluting the death of a Venetian citizen. He might leave, the court agrees, and pay a fine, but Antonio is to have the use of half of Shylock's wealth, with which shall go to Lorenzo upon Shylock's death. For aid measure, Antonio insists that Shylock must also become a Christian. Word soon comes that Antonio's rich cargo vessels have arrived, and the play ends happily for everyone except Shylock and perhaps poor Jessica, who is left alone on stage, wondering where she fits between the two worlds of finance. And in modern era, I have Waiting for Godot. And the synopsis is the story of Waiting Godot is a story that depicts hope that never ends. Actors in this story include Vladimir, Esteron, Bozo, Lucky, and Boy. They are a group of friends who are very loyal to the arrival of Godot. In fact, Godot would never come. He kept talking, but he didn't show up. His absence had made him the center of attention, and it was his way of showing his power in terms of Vladimir and Estragon to keep waiting for Godot. They hoped to come soon, but they waited in vain because the drama was too late to be told that Godot never came. When Estragon was trying to untie his shoelace, he kept trying but failed, and came his friend that Vladimir. Estragon looks desperate. He gets angry when he can't take off his shoes. On the other hand, they are bound to Godot, but they are also bound to each other. They are comrades in arms. It's like waiting for Godot, just like not knowing what to do. So they often talk about the topic but don't try to cheer up Estragon. Vladimir looks very sad. He invites Estragon to commemorate his triumph, yet that after them are honorable people. They talk, they work among important people, and together they work and in hand down the Eiffel Tower. Apart from being proud of his past, Vladimir also appears as a religious leader who is often wished in explaining the situation in the Bible. But actually, he is confused that doesn't know what the story is about. Vladimir say that one of the thieves was saved because he confessed his sin. Therefore, they should confess their sins, but Estragon doesn't know what sin he should confess. He also didn't understand about who his savior was. Estragon also say that the Bibles were written by four people, but why only one told about the story of two criminals? Even Estragon questioned what the true content of the Bible itself is. Vladimir and Estragon too are people of not very clear origin and educational background, but they discuss things that other people might not care about. Godot's arrival means salvation. At least, they could soon be free from dependence on waiting for Godot. This reminds us of the coming of Christ as written in Christian teaching. They were in a non-free situation as attachment awaited Godot, a character who didn't come. They are not only bound by God, but more than that, their attachment is also visible in one particular place, and this is also in a state of concern. Vladimir character is a character who is described as having a responsibility. Lucky to talk about Allah, but the conversation wouldn't well. He spoke he spoke as if he would not stop. Estragon seemed to be in despair. He was no longer able to maintain the loyalty of waiting for Godot. Vladimir's answer said that Godot will punish them if they don't faithfully wait, hinting that otherwise there is no answer to the question. Because how Godot punished them without coming to see them. Vladimir used to seem rational, ultimately helpless. To he seemed desperate. Apparently, the rational mind cannot solve the problem. Now, question number 2. Explain about the famous play writer in this type. At least finding 2 persons describe about their artworks also. A. Tragic, B. Comedy, and C. Tragic comedy. A. Tragic. First, Othello by William Shakespeare. Othello is a tragedy by William Shakespeare, probably written in 1603. The story revolves around 2 characters, Othello and Iago. Othello is a Moorish general in the Venetian army charged with the generalship of Venice on the eve of war with the Ottoman Turks over the island of Cyprus. He has just married Desdemona, a beautiful and wealthy Venetian, much younger than himself, against the wish of her father. Iago is Othello's jealous and bitter inside, who maliciously stalks his masters jealously until the usually stoic Moor kill his beloved wife in a fit of blind rage. Second, Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. Waiting for Godot is a play written by Samuel Beckett in which 2 characters, Vladimir as a Didi and Estragon as a Gogo, engage in a variety of discussion and encounters while awaiting the titular Godot who never arrived. B. Comedy. First, The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. The Merchant of Venice is a 16th century play written by William Shakespeare in which a merchant in Venice named Antonio defaults on a large loan fulfilled by a Jewish moneylender, Shylock. It is believed to have been written between 15 and 1906 and 1599. Second, Everyman in His Humor by Ben Jonson. Everyman in His Humor is a 15 and 1908 play by English playwright Ben Jonson. The play belongs to the subgenre of the humorous comedy, in which each major character is dominated by an overriding humor or obsession. C. Tragic comedy. First, Trifles by Susan Glaspell. Trifles is a 1-act play written by Susan Glaspell. It was first performed by the Provincetown Players at the Wharf Theatre in Provincetown, Massachusetts on August 8, 1916. In the original performance, Glaspell played the role of Miss Hale. The play is frequently anthologized in American literature textbooks. Written during the first wave feminist movement, the play contrasts how women act in public and in private, as well as how they perform in front of other women versus how they perform in front of men. Second, Oedipus Rex or Oedipus the King by Sophocles. Oedipus Rex or Oedipus the King is an Athenian tragedy by Sophocles that was first performed around 429 BC. Originally, to the ancient Greeks, the title was simply Oedipus, as it is referred to by Aristotle in the Poetics. It is thought to have been renamed Oedipus Tyrannus to distinguish it from another of Sophocles' plays, Oedipus at Colons. In antiquity, the term tyrant referred to a ruler with no legitimate claim to rule, but it didn't necessarily have a negative connotation. Question number 3. Explain the characteristic, the history, and the origin of A. Tragic comedy, B. Comedy, and C. Tragic. A. Tragic comedy. The characteristic. First, it is a dramatic work that is essentially theatrical, that combine tragic and comic features. Second, it usually stars commoners, hoodlum, or rogue characters. Third, despite going through tragic situation, the outcome of the story is usually happy. 4. The anecdote consists of different episodes, each of which confronts the protagonist with a series of obstacles to overcome. 5. Sometimes the presence of comic element is used according to ironically highlight the tragic fate of the character. 6. In its modern aspect, the tragicomedy has been associated with the drama of the absurd, that is, to which poses laughter as the only way out of a tragic existence and meaningless. The origin and history of tragicomedy. Tragicomedy, dramatic work incorporating both tragic and comic elements, when coined by the Roman dramatist Plautus in the 2nd century BC. The word denote a play in which gods and men, masters and slaves reverse the roles traditionally assigned to them. Gods and heroes acting in comic burlesque, and slaves adopting tragic dignity. This startling innovation might be seen in Plautus' Amphitryon. In the Renaissance, tragicomedy became a genre of play that mixed tragic element into drama that was mainly comic. The Italian writer Battista Guarini defined tragicomedy as having most of tragedy's element. Example, a certain gravity of diction, the depiction of important public events, and the arousal of compassion, but never carrying the action to tragedy's conclusion, and judiciously including such comic elements as low-born character, laughter, and jest. Central to this kind of tragic comedy were danger, reversal, and a happy ending. Despite it is affront to the strict neoclassicism of the day, which forbade the mixing of genres, tragicomedy flourished, especially in England, whose writers largely ignored the edict of neoclassicism. 19th century Romantic writers exposed Shakespeare's use of tragicomedy in the belief that his play closely mirrored nature, and they used him as a model for their works. The dramas of George Buchner, Victor Hugo, and Christian Dietrich Graeber reflect his influence. With the advent of realism later in the 19th century, Tragicomedy underwent yet another revision. Still intermingling, the two element comic interludes now highlight the ironic counterpoints inherent in a play, making the tragedy seem even more devastating. B. Comedy. The characteristic. First, mistaken identity and or misconception. Second, reason versus emotion. Third, fate and the fantastical. 4. Idyllic settings. 5. Separation and reconciliation. 6. Happy endings. The origin of comedy are thus bound up with vegetation ritual. Aristotle, in his Poetics, state that comedy originated in pollic songs and that, like tragedy, it began in improvisation. Though tragedy evolved by stage that can be traced, the progress of comedy passed unnoticed because it was not taken seriously. When tragedy and comedy arose, both wrote one or the other, according to their natural bent. Those of the graver sort who might previously have been inclined to celebrate the action of the great in epic poetry turned to tragedy. Poets of a lower type who had set forth the doing of the ignoble and ineffective turned to the comedy. The distinction is basic to the Aristotelian differentiation between tragedy and comedy. Tragedy imitates men who are better than the average and comedy men who are worse. For centuries, efforts at defining comedy were to be along the line set down by Aristotle. The view that tragedy deals with personages of high estate and comedy deal with lowly types, that tragedy treats of matter of great public import while comedy is concerned with the private affairs of mundane life, and that the characters and even of tragedy are historic and so in some sense true, while the humbler material of comedy are but fake. Implicit to in Aristotle is the distinction in styles deemed appropriate to the treatment of tragic and comic story. As long as there was at least a theoretical separation of comic and tragic styles, either genre could, on occasion, appropriate the stylistic manner of the other to a striking effect, which was never possible after the crossing of stylistic lines became commonplace. The history of comedy. In ancient Greece, comedy seems to have originated in songs or recitations of purpose of fertility, festival or gathering, or also in making fun at other people on stereotypes. In the Poetic, Aristotle states that comedy originated in pollic ritual and festival or myths. It is basically an imitation of the ridiculous, which is a species of the ugly. However, Aristotle thought that comedy is a good thing. It brings forth happiness, which for Aristotle is the ideal state, the final goal in any activity. He does believe that we humans feel pleasure oftentimes by doing the wrong thing, but he doesn't necessarily believe that comedy and humor is the wrong thing. It is also not true for Aristotle that a comedy must involve sexual humor to qualify as a comedy. A comedy is about the fortunate rise of a sympathetic character. A happy ending is all that is required in his opinion. On the contrary, the Greek philosopher Plato thought that comedy is a distraction to the self. He believed it produced an emotion that overrides ration, rational self-control and learning. In the Republic, Plato, he said that the guardians of the state should avoid laughter. For ordinarily, when one abandons himself to violent laughter, his condition provokes a violent reaction. Plato says comedy should be tightly controlled if one wants to achieve the ideal state. C. Tragic. The characteristic. Aristotle defines tragedy according to 7 characteristics. First, it is mimetic. Second, it is serious. Third, it tells a full story of an appropriate length. Four, it contains rhythm and harmony. 5. Rhythm and harmony occur in different combinations in different parts of the tragedy. 6. It is performed rather than narrative. And last, it arouses feelings of pity and fear and then puts these feelings through catharsis. The origin of tragedy. The word tragedy comes from the Greek word tragos, which means God, and oid, which means songs. A tragedy is a dramatic poem or play in formal language and in most cases has a tragic or unhappy ending. One may ask, what does a god have to do with a dramatic play? There are many theories that explain what a god has to do with this. It has been said that the actors dressed in God's skin to represent satyrs. Another, which say that the actor or the singer competes for a god. It was even said that the god represented unhappy times. And ancient Greek tragedy is like nothing that we have produced in modern English. For over 23 centuries, tragedies have left us wondering and full of questions about the existence of ancient Greeks. The way life is described is a world like no other. The effect of tragedies often depends on the buildings, the scenery, the dancing, the actor, and etc. The only concert parts of a tragedy we have are the words. Tragedies were first performed as religious ritual and to honor the gods and goddesses. A lot of what it did was explain the relation between the human and the divine, explain the relation between the human world and the material world, and explain violence and its origin. Tragedies start with a dithyramb, which is a singing of a choral lyric, and eventually grow to a mythological or heroic story. Ancient philosopher Aristotle defines tragedy as a representation of a serious, complete action which has magnitude in embellished speech, with each of its elements used separately in the various parts of the play, represented by people acting and not by narration, accomplishing by means of pity and terror the catharsis of such emotion. And the history of tragedy. Tragedy begins in ancient Greece, of course, and the first great tragedies were staged as part of a huge festival known as the city Dionysia. Thousands of citizens, Greek men, that is for no women were allowed, would gather in the vast amphitheater to watch a trilogy of tragic plays, such as Aeschylus' Aristeia. Going to the theater in ancient Greece was, socially speaking, closer to attending a football match than a modern day theater. However, tragedy is not the earliest of all literary genres. Instead, a third genre of drama, known as the satire plays, is thought by some critics, such as Oscar Burke in his History of Theatre, to have been the first of all literary genres from which comedy and tragedy both eventually developed. Satire plays were vaudeville satires or burlesques which featured actors sporting large strap-on penises, the pillows being a popular symbol of fertility and virility linked with the god Dionysus. Only one satire play survives in its in it is entirety, written by the great tragedian Euripides. Cyclops centers on the incident from the story of Odysseus when the Greek hero found himself a prisoner in the cave of Polyphemus, the one-eyed monster. And that is my answer, and thank you for watching.